One show I remember where Cody takes Mary out to eat, and she talks about how would you feel if I had someone else, and he says, oh, it would be so against nature. I thought, then nature, you don't understand anything about nature. A male seahorse carries the baby. A female black widow ensures child support when she mates. Only when you put animals in captivity do you need one bull to fertilize a whole herd. That is economics, and human beings did that. In nature, female mammals will mate with the most prominent male and as many prominent males as they want to, as long as they're in heat. And the only way he can prevent it is to beat up the other males. Cody knows nothing about nature. If he wants to know, and he doesn't, how those women feel, they would feel exactly the same way he would feel if he had to share his only wife with a brother husband.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or more. And like it or suffer eternal damnation.
Well, Cody's just kind of an idiot anyway.
Where do we get to the point where we as human beings can inflict a role, a lifestyle choice on somebody else that we ourselves would never tolerate for a minute? Polygamy is an extreme dual standard. There is nothing equal or fair or just about it.
No. Well, and once again, that's one of the reasons it's illegal. The federal government has deemed it illegal because it is a form of slavery. And on top of it, the economic reason, it's a form of slavery. And when our government will finally understand that, and our court system. But as long as we have attorney generals throughout the nation that don't prosecute it because they're getting campaign funds from the FLDS, from the AUB, from these groups, then as long as we have attorney generals that aren't going to prosecute it, there's no way for those of us that try to stand up against it to further what we're trying to tell people in the public. I mean, it's kind of futile.
Well, I know it feels like that, but if you stop and look at the overall picture, there are certain human beings that feel powerless unless they're controlling somebody else and stealing somebody else's power. These human beings always try to enslave other human beings. When slavery went out in the South, even black men began enslaving their own women and selling them in prostitution. It's very popular. White men collected them, become polygamists. But slavery continued. It just changed its brand a little bit. Some done in the name of money, some done in the name of God, but all was males having a sexual right and no responsibility to go with it. They could sell their women, work their women, sell their children, work their children. They could do whatever they wanted. They enslaved them. And that mental illness still exists. So if we look at human rights, the more people that lose their human rights in this nation, something sooner or later has got to come to a head. Nature abhors a vacuum. It won't stay this way. It'll either get better or it'll get worse. And it may get worse before it gets better, but it cannot stay this way. And there's got to be a light at the end of the tunnel. And there's got to be people like you and Ed and me and hundreds more that dare to say there is no religious justification for violating another's human rights.
Right. Exactly. And fortunately, we are members of several groups that try to get that word out. Sound Choices Coalition works very hard in court cases, in sending information to legislatures. And hopefully now in Utah, all of the printed information that is sent to them in form of books, the legislatures can actually read. Not that they will, but they are passing a law in Utah that books, because the legislatures weren't allowed to accept gifts over $10 in value. Now, the Utah legislature, hopefully with this new bill, will be able to accept gifts over $10 of value, which would include books. Whereas previously they weren't allowed to accept them. They were usually just sent back. And so now that they can accept them, hopefully they'll actually read them and actually become informed legislatures rather than misguided. And I mean, I wonder how many of members of our government watch Sister Wives and think that that's, oh, so that's what's going on out there. Yeah, no. Read a book.
I wonder if those guys believe everything that went on Star Wars.
Well, considering some of the latest things that are coming out of our government, I couldn't put it past them.
Does make one wonder, doesn't it? So many books have been written from inside stories of polygamy that it's mind-boggling when you start really looking at all the different people that have written books. And what's even more mind-boggling is so many voices that have spoken for so long and so few have listened. That's even more mind-boggling.
Absolutely. I really wish that the parole board in Texas would have read Escape, before they decided to grant Meryl Jessup parole. If they would have read anything about what a horrible human being he is, maybe he would not have been granted parole and would not be able to perform marriages of 12-year-old girls, especially his daughter.
Well, the way the law generally handles polygamy is very badly. My father went to prison in 1944 and 45. He had a child bride. When he was in prison, she escaped with her 5 children. She was killed in an airplane crash. The state of Utah let my father out of prison and gave him back the 5 children she escaped with. Her family fought in court to prevent it and lost. Gave him back those children if he would promise not to live polygamy, which he did promise, but he took more wives after that. And every Sunday when he did gather the family together, he would tell us, for years, I grew up hearing this, the state of Utah gave me back my children because I was a martyr for God. And the finger of God struck that airplane out of the sky and killed Rachel because she broke her covenants to me. And he did it so I wouldn't have to.
Yeah.
So we were taught from day one, you don't disobey. And if she was killed by God and it was okay, God killed her so I wouldn't have to kill her. And that's how blood atonement was in our lives from the very beginning. We listened to these stories about these girls in Islam and honor killings. We got the same thing, only we call it blood atonement. It's exactly the same thing.
Exactly.
And it's a basic indoctrination of the religion itself, and the law has always turned their back on it. Dad got those kids back, and Dad raised those kids. And the thing that's so pathetic about it is that her daughter was given into the Kingston group, and I have nieces in the Kingston group. In other words, it never slowed Dad down one bit. It made him a hero.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of misinformation is out there, especially regarding the trafficking of young girls between the fundamentalist groups. And that's what it is. It is trafficking.
Yes, it is.
They swap for new bloodline and for favors and for work, for jobs. A man in the AUB can be wanting a job, somewhere in southern Utah, and he says, "Well, I'm going to cut down my, I'm going to undercut you on this construction job, but here's my daughter to the FLDS." It's trafficking,
Yes.
and they move these girls around from group to group, not only for favors, but also for bloodline, for new bloodline, because of the polygamy downs. It's they need that new bloodline in there every now and then, so that they don't have Down's children all the time. It's sad. It's sad that, and there are girls. Well, there was a girl that was kidnapped back by the FLDS, a 17-year-old girl kidnapped in Mesquite and taken back to the FLDS. And it is quite possible that she has now been moved to either Canada, which is, the Blackmore group up in Canada, or even down here in Mexico. She might even be down here in Mexico. But she got moved to and they do that. They move these girls, Blackmore, in Canada. Oh my gosh, thank God for Canada. They're actually really starting to do something about it. And they're actually starting to prosecute for it. And they're actually following the bloodlines. And so I'm hoping that the United States will take a cue from Canada and start to dig. I mean, we dig in our research. We dig, anytime that a book about polygamy is written, or the documentary that Sam did up in Sundance that now got picked up by Showtime, I believe, which is great. That's wonderful because it'll actually educate people. But we dig for this. We look, we search, we find the truth, and I'm hoping that the United States government will start to dig.
That is Sam Brower's Prophets Pray for our
Yes.
listening audience. And really looking forward to seeing that hit the airwaves.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing it. I think it's going to be a really good eye opener for, fortunately, Showtime can be seen all over the world.
And fortunately, Sam's movie, Prophets Pray, really is a reality show.
It really is a reality show. Yes. Yes, it is. It really is a reality show. But
inside polygamy.
Yeah, it's I hope it's going to be an eye opener to a lot of people, and I hope that the lawmakers of the United States take the time to watch it.
Well, I think if we have enough grassroots people that will actually say something, right? Their congressmen say something. People don't usually do much if they're given money, but if they can see they're going to lose a lot of votes and people start reacting instead of being apathetic, it would
Right.
make a huge difference. It really would. Polygamy is an industry. It's not a religion.
True.
It's an industry that is very shady, hiding in the name of religion.
Yes, they hide behind the religion card. They play the religion card in order to enslave their women and their children. Young boys being killed out on construction sites, and it's not, and then nothing is done. Nothing is done, and so they go on, and who knows how many children have actually been injured or killed doing things that they're not supposed to be doing when they should be in school, it's covered up. They just disappear. Because the thing is that as long as they just, if a child is killed or even, crib death, or they still have that birth certificate, and the federal government doesn't know that that child is dead. And so they might even be getting the welfare for their dead children
For years.
for years, years. But nobody wants to dig.
Right.
It's too time consuming.
Well, the irony, the sick part of it is that it's working. If we looked at the money trail, it would be self-exposing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The 2012 census for Hilldale, Utah, the 2012 census showed zero average income.
Right.
Zero. And that's the national census. How can an entire town have zero average income?
And did you see the size of the families? Look at Joe Jessup's family in National Geographic, taking up 3 pages in the centerfold. A typical Hilldale family with zero income? No.
Zero income. And that's on the national census. I mean,
Right.
This is a government document. And
but the money that went into that town on welfare for
Yeah.
all of those spiritual wives' children was massive.
oh, absolutely. But according to our government, there's zero average income. So all they have to do is look at that. I mean, wouldn't the Census Bureau or somebody, wouldn't that spark a question there somewhere?
Well, there's a bit of national insanity going on here. We have a lot of legislation come up periodically that when a woman is pregnant, the right to life, the law wants to demand that she does the right thing by her child. Yet, the law never mentions the father or cares about the father, and he has no legal responsibility toward that child ever unless he married the woman.
Correct.
Okay, so she is entirely responsible for her pregnancy, and he has none.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just a little symbol of what is going on in the rest of the world about children being born and fathers having no responsibility. Both parents created that child, and both parents have a responsibility to that child, whether it was legal or not. If the government took DNA testing and made the father equally responsible, polygamy would shrink.
In the real world, outside of polygamy, women put the father of the child, they put his name on the birth certificate. There are laws in the United States where the father must be financially responsible. And so if the woman is on welfare or anything, and if they're not married, then he does have to pay child support. And she can garnish his wages for that. She can get that. She can get support from him for that child. But in polygamy world, the father's name isn't on the birth certificate.
Well, that goes in the non-religious polygamy world as well. I watched some shows on Ayana's TV on the Oprah Winfrey Network where a guy had, I think it was 45 children with 17 different women that didn't know about each other. And that's very, very typical in some cultures in the inner city that has nothing to do with religion. They do it just because they can. The women are single moms, and they don't know that
They don't know who the baby daddy is.
Well, I know who the baby's daddy is. They just don't. They just don't realize that they're one of many. They're not his. He doesn't care about them. He's using them.
Yeah,
That's what they don't realize.
yeah.
And when she had that show, a lot of these baby mamas came forward and were shocked to find out how many children he had with how many people. And after that came on, a lot more guys got on the show and were doing the same thing. So it was being done because they could. These guys were not paying child support for these kids, obviously.
No.
So they must be some way that they skirt it. Now, in my family, they skirted it by lying on the birth certificate. And so I wonder how many people don't know they're lying, don't realize that that's not how you spell the father's name, especially if you're one of 17.
True. Well, as I said, you would think that things like the census, there's so many red flags out there, but our government and our lawmakers and our law enforcers simply don't pay attention. They turn a blind eye. I believe that they think that it is going to be such a disaster and such a mess when they dig into it. They just don't want to be bothered, which is true, because if they were to dig into it and actually do something and start cutting off the welfare, take the children, they say, well, we can't put all the children in foster care or anything because the state can't afford to take care of that many children. The state's already taking care of that many children.
There's a simpler way than that. You could go into these compounds like Warren Jeff's, and instead of letting Willie have everything in the auction, divide that up and give it back to the people it came from, to all the wives and children that should put the money in the bank and educate those kids and set those women free, send them to college, dissolve their empires. Don't just take over their families and take care of them. They lied. They took the empires and they put them in the name of a church or a corporation or some other, they made it in another entity that couldn't be touched, usually a church.
Yeah.
Break that down, dissolve their empires and force them to support the people they took the money from. That would end it. You're right about going and taking care of all the people. Look at all of the money it cost Texas to make that raid in El Dorado. They should have gone right back, and maybe they did ultimately, and dissolved the empire, which of course Warren doesn't have it now. But that's justice. The state is entitled to that.
True. And it would, in the end, save the state a lot of money.
Yes.
It would save a lot of money. They don't want to be bothered because our lawmakers know that once they start to dig in, it is going to be a very, very difficult, long, drawn out battle. And they don't want to fight that fight. They would rather turn a blind eye and let these groups hide behind religion and just keep doing what they're doing, because therefore then our legislatures and our lawmakers don't have to work as hard.
And they don't have to stand up and do the job that they're allegedly supposed to be doing, and they can turn their back on slavery and maybe even make more money. And I think that's just plain pathetic.
Oh, absolutely. The more people read, and with Sam, with Prophet Trey, and I'm in hopes that people will become self-educated on polygamy, and therefore the government will be forced to actually pay attention. If we just plug away one by one on Twitter and Facebook and through your show, and it just, plug away little bit by little bit, hopefully we can get the word out and people can actually understand the reality of polygamy.
It is really grand that you and Ed have always had the courage to walk through the door when it opened. And I really respect you tremendously for that. I know it's been a long, hard, discouraging road. But as I told Ed, I want to tell you, you don't really know how many lives you've affected positively they haven't gotten back to you. So you've had some wonderful effects, and I want you to look in the mirror and love the woman you see because she's marvelous.
Oh, thank you. You're so sweet. I adore you. I absolutely adore you. And I greatly appreciate the opportunities that you give us to be able to speak out against polygamy, speak out against um, corporate television, and speak out against the lawmakers that aren't doing their job.
It needs to be done. We need to have awareness. It needs to be done. People need to have the courage to look the truth in the eye and do something about it.
Absolutely.
Because if they don't, their freedom's next.
Yeah. Yeah. And we need to gather our forces together and try to get the word out as much as possible so that um, so that we can help the women and the children that are enslaved in polygamy.
We really do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Always.
Thank you.
Okay, till next round.
Till next round, my dear.
Okay.